Welcome back to our channel. When most people hear the word worship, they think music. They picture a song, a band, a chorus repeated until hearts finally catch up. But long before worship became a melody on earth, it was a posture in heaven. Before instruments played, saints knelt. Before praises rose, wills surrendered. The heart of worship begins with surrender. Romans 12 verse 1 gives one of the clearest definitions of true worship in all of Scripture. Paul writes, "I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service." Now notice, Paul does not begin with song. He begins with sacrifice. He does not begin with atmosphere. He begins with offering. And what he describes is not a moment, it is a lifestyle. The Christian does not merely worship with lifted hands. He worships with a surrendered life. Paul's appeal comes after 11 chapters of deep theology, chapters where God's mercy is detailed, defended, and displayed. It's as if Paul is saying, after seeing who God is and what God has done, the only reasonable response is surrender. Worship is not the attempt to get something from God. Worship is the response to what God has already given. Worship begins with the will. Paul says, present your bodies. Presentation is intentional. It is volitional. It is not coerced or accidental. Worship begins when we choose to give God access not just to our Sunday morning voice, but our daily decisions, our time, our habits, our relationships, and our priorities. God is not merely after emotional expressions. He is after surrendered wills. And a surrendered will says, "Lord, not my way, but yours be done." Worship also is sacrifice. Paul calls believers to offer themselves as a living sacrifice. In the Old Testament, sacrifices died, but in the New Testament, sacrifices live. But the struggle with the living sacrifice is that it keeps trying to crawl off the altar. True worship is the daily decision to stay there, to remain yielded to God's purpose when comfort, culture, and convenience invite us elsewhere. Sacrifice makes worship costly, and what costs nothing changes nothing. Worship is holy. Paul says our offering should be holy and acceptable. Holiness is not a performance, it's alignment. Holiness says, God sets the standard for my morality, for my character, for my speech, and for my conduct. Worship that refuses holiness becomes nothing more than an empty ritual. But worship linked to holiness becomes spiritual transformation. Worship is also reasonable. Paul calls this worship reasonable. In other words, worship is not extreme. It is fitting. It is logical. Given the mercies of God, His grace, His forgiveness, His patience, His salvation, surrender is not radical. It is right. Worship is what love does when it realizes how much it has received. If worship is surrender, then worship shows up in how we forgive. It shows up in how we speak. It shows up in what we watch. It shows up in how we treat people. It shows up in our purity. It shows up in obedience. It shows up in secret when no one is watching. Worship without surrender is performance, but surrender without song is still worship. Before worship becomes music, it must become offering. Before it becomes expression, it must become surrender. And before it becomes public, it must become personal. The truest worshiper is not the one who sings the loudest, but the one who yields the deepest. Thanks for being with me today. I hope you have been blessed. If you were, please leave a comment below, share with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. See you soon for the continuation of this series.